The MoneroTopia guest segment is sponsored by Cake Wallet. Store, send, receive, and exchange your Monero and Bitcoin safely on iOS and Android too. Cake Wallet is open source, and you always control your own keys.
They're a big
All
part
right,
of
you're good. All right.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for doing that, because we definitely aren't shilling Cake Wallet enough. We could always shield them more. They are the main sponsor of this tent, along with Xano and Confidential Layer. So super tremendous thank you to Cake Wallet. It took a lot to get this tent, and I think it's paid off. I think it's been fantastic. So we're calling this like MoneroTopia at PorcFest. These gentlemen have participated, I think, in two MoneroTopias already, right?
Last two.
Yeah, the last two in Mexico City. They wanted to come up here. They like hanging out with cypherpunks, apparently. And you guys are going to learn why, because as badass as us cypherpunks are, unfortunately, sometimes you're gonna need a lawyer, right? We're up against a behemoth of a system. We're using cryptography as one of our weapons, but we also have to use the legal system to our advantage as well. These guys are out there fighting on behalf of those that are doing the right thing in the crypto anarchist cypherpunk community. So tremendous thank you to you guys for doing that work, and look forward to hearing your updates on the Bitcoin fog case. So thank you guys. Take it away.
Appreciate it. Hey, everybody. My name is Mike Hassard. This is Tor Ekeland, and we're the defense attorneys for Roman Sterlingov. He's just one of many people who have been wrongfully locked up for crypto-related activities.
He's one of the prisoners on the war on crypto, like Ian Friedman, Roger Ver, Roman Storm, Samurai Wallet,
Keon Rodriguez, William Hill.
Yeah, and so Roman's part of that sort of Biden era war on crypto. And what Roman was convicted of in March of last year was running a custodial mixer known as Bitcoin Fog.
Bitcoin Fog was one of the first darknet mixers available to be able to anonymize your Bitcoin transactions. So for everybody who doesn't know, on the blockchain on Bitcoin, you have 5 different pieces of information. You have the sender's address, recipient's address, the amount sent, transaction ID, and date and time of the transfer. Now, those pieces of information can be stitched together by organizations like Chainalysis, a company that have a lot of government contracts around the world for law enforcement, and be able to trace the source of Bitcoin. And like Doug was saying in the last presentation, you know, when your Bitcoin gets flagged, a lot of exchanges refuse to accept it. And it's becoming a bigger and bigger problem as Bitcoin goes around and you know, it gets messed up and flagged.
And Chainalysis is the main company all over the world that's doing the flagging. And they're using proprietary black box software that we weren't allowed to look at trial. Chainalysis forensics were a big thing at the trial. Because what happened with Roman, even though we don't even think that what he did should be illegal, we don't think mixing, actually the judge said in the case, mixing per se is not illegal, but what he got prosecuted for was money laundering. And they said like a bunch of the money from Silk Road went through it, Alphabet and all these other darknet markets went through Bitcoin Fog, because you can hide when you mix your address, you can't trace it back from Bitcoin Fog. And it, for the most part, worked.
That was one of the problems with it, is that it worked, you know, because we were trying to show to the government that Roman was innocent. He wasn't the individual who set this up. Now, whether or not it was legal or illegal, that's a different issue. You know, we think that Bitcoin mixing should be totally legal. But the fact of the matter was that Roman actually didn't set it up. And we had a very difficult time proving that in court, because all the money that was in his accounts came from Bitcoin Fog or came through Bitcoin Fog. And we weren't, because it worked, we weren't able to show the original legal source of the funds because the software was so effective.
So not a single piece of evidence came in a trial of Roman actually running Bitcoin Fog. Like when they arrested him at the airport, he was a Swedish citizen. This all happened when he was in Sweden. He gets arrested with all his computers, like 3 laptops, 3 terabytes worth of hard drives, 10 years worth of thumb drives, his personal diaries. There's not a single thing in any of it showing him operating Bitcoin Fog. I've wandered out of frame. My apologies.
And this is a photo of Roman that you can see on your screen here, chilling by a pond with some lily pads. And, you know, Roman was incarcerated pre-trial. So he was arrested at the Los Angeles International Airport in, May of 2021. Yeah. And he's been locked up ever since. Now, you're only supposed to incarcerate somebody pre-trial for 2 reasons in America. The first reason is if they're a danger to the community. They commit a very violent act. They got a lot of weapons, and they're known to have violent propensities. And Roman clearly didn't have that, never hurt a fly. And the second reason could be if they determine him to be a flight risk. And one of the core points that they thought that he was a flight risk because he got all this secret internet money and he could buy passports and fly around the world. And it was just taken so far out of context. And the judge, he didn't understand what Bitcoin was. And I think that was really exemplified in one of our pretrial hearings where the judge in the case asked us if there's an administrator to the blockchain that we can bring into court and have explain or take a look at records. Like, it just showed that they don't know anything about this space. Part of our job is not to explain it to them.
And that when the judge said that was like a year and a half into the proceedings, because that's a great question if you're a beginner, right? But when you're incarcerating somebody pre-trial based on the weight and evidence in a case that's purely circumstantial and all based on blockchain forensics that are sketchy at best, that's I think that's a huge problem. But anyhow, they found him guilty at trial, and he got 12 and a half years.
They were sentenced to 150 months. Probation recommended 240 months in prison. That's a total of 20 years. The government was seeking at sentencing 30 years in prison. That's 360 months in prison. And if we were to go by the US sentencing guidelines, just to put into perspective how out of whack these guidelines are, they recommended a sentence of life in prison.
And they imposed a $400 million forfeiture order against him, even though he doesn't have $400 million. And that's all based on what they say went through Bitcoin fog from darknet markets like Silk Road and Alpha Bay and Agora and stuff like that. Like when they arrested him, he had about a little under $2 million worth of Bitcoin. He got into Bitcoin in 2010, right? And the best that we can tell is he did a peer-to-peer transaction with the people who started Bitcoin fog, because there's this trace that the government did from 2011 where they say Roman paid for the DNS registration to the Bitcoin fog website, the ClearNet site that had a link to, you know, the onion mixer. That trace goes through, like, I don't know, there's that it right there. It goes through multiple addresses, none of which the government had the private keys to. So, you know, some of the agents even testified that, you know, that is consistent just with a normal peer-to-peer transaction. And why that should scare you is picture that you're getting off an airplane like 10 years from now and they arrest you and their main piece of evidence against you is a peer-to-peer transaction you did over a decade ago that they don't have the private keys to or anything, but they've been sitting in this room with the forensic software with this company that's been wining and dining them. Chainalysis hired one of the prosecutors in our case. One of the IRS criminal investigators in our case started a private company to investigate this case that Chainalysis then bought 5 months later. We weren't allowed to raise any of that at trial.
Nothing. In fact, through the trial, there was a lot that we were not allowed to raise. I'm going to back up a couple of slides and bring you to the page with our non-compete here. So we're trying to get the information from Chainalysis. We're trying to look at the source code. We're trying to look to see, okay, like how did they come up with the determination here? What heuristics were used during their investigation? No, we're not going to share that with you. And it got further than that. You know, they got a protective order from the court that has criminal punishments for disclosing the information. So if we had an expert witness in and they took a look at Chainalysis heuristics and then they somehow discussed or used those heuristics later or anything else, it wasn't just a civil fine that they were going to be imposed upon them. It was criminal liability.
So we had a hard time getting experts, and the killer, as you see on the screen, there's we were asked to sign a non-compete clause to look at evidence in a federal criminal case. Now we asked the judge and we said, can you name one time in the history of the federal criminal courts where a criminal defendant has been asked to sign a non-compete to look at the forensic software, and they could not come up with a single case. The best that they came up with was an intermediate appellate court in New Jersey in a DNA case. One case in the entire history of the United States. And what happened, what that non-compete did is we had like blockchain core developers who were willing to come in as experts. You know, a lot of top people were willing to come in, but they saw that non-compete and they saw that protective order and they were like, hey man, I can't do this because 5 years from now, if I do something that Chainalysis doesn't like, they're going to sue me under this. And they were right? Like I wouldn't recommend any of my transactional clients to sign something like this. And that's what we told the government. And because we refused to do that, we didn't get the rest of the discovery on Chainalysis software, which was a huge part of the case.
Now we had conducted our own tracing because we had gone to Bitcoin Miami in 2022. We had very similar speech to what we're making here, but before the trial. And somebody came up to me afterwards and he's like, dude, this is my fucking Alamo, man. Like, what's going on here is fucked up. I want to help you out, right? So he was a tracer for a company called CipherTrace. He goes to his company and tells everyone they're all tracers, they're all cypherpunks, you know? And he was like, look, we got to help these guys out. So CipherTrace agrees to be our expert witnesses who are going to combat Chainalysis, who's working for the government, their interpretations of the blockchain. And
they're going to do it for free because the government seized all of Roman's money and we don't have any money when we're doing this, right? So we're like fucking winging it like we always do.
So we prepare this trial with CipherTrace. We had a wonderful woman named Jonelle still. I hope she's doing well. I love Jonelle. And we were working with her on the case. And about a week before trial, MasterCard, which owns CipherTrace, informed the tracers that, hey, you guys are not allowed to go on here. Everyone went quiet. Everyone lawyered up. We don't really know what happened or what transpired, but the ultimate conclusion was that we lost our expert tracing firm that was going to combat Chainalysis interpretation.
After they'd submitted a report basically saying that the government's forensics were all fucked. And so at like a week before trial, when we can't get another expert, all of a sudden, the best we could figure is like MasterCard got a phone call. Right?
Now we did try to get new experts, and we got some pretty good experts. We got Laurent Salat, founder of OXT. It's a tracing company out of the EU. And we have Brian Bishop, Bitcoin core developer. Those were both denied experts on Daubert. Best you can tell, the main reason Laurent was denied was because he's French. Yeah. And being French, the French don't extradite their own citizens to the United States for criminal punishment. So the judge was like, well, if he violates the protective order we have on Chainalysis heuristics, how are we going to send him to jail? You know, so that's what prevented us from having Laurent Salat come in. And Brian Bishop, they didn't like his biohacking.
Biohacking. Yeah.
They made a big shame of that.
I mean, you can go on and on about this trial. And if you have questions, ask us afterwards. We have we've got the recording of Roman, right?
We do. This will be the second time we're showing this publicly. The first time was
at Bitcoin Vegas.
Bitcoin Vegas a couple of weeks ago. But this is a recording straight out from Roman Sterling from behind bars. So it's the first time a lot of people are going to have an opportunity to hear Roman in his own voice.
He's in Fort Dix right now doing 12 and a half years. He's served about close to 5 now with all the pretrial detention.
You know, we can also mention this. The government made so many different misrepresentations.
This is a good one.
And at one point in the trial, they brought this document, this image right here. And it appears to be a Tinder chat that says in the middle box there, you're wondering what I do in terms of magically having such photos or in terms of money laundering.
Like, and they're saying this is Roman's chat.
They're saying that they took this from his device and that there's him talking about money laundering, right? So we were in the middle of the trial when this new evidence came out, and our forensics expert, Jeff Fishbach, took one look at the file type and was like, hey, that's not like something you find on Tinder. That's not a screenshot that you'd make on your phone of your Tinder chat. What is this? So we take a look at it closer. It turns out that this was cropped by the US government from an ebook about internet speed dating that was on his phone, that was on his e-device. He had like an e-reader, you know? So here's the book here. It's called The Message Game by Ice White, a pickup artist out of London, England. And you can see that there's watermarks on the right image, or it says white or ice white or something. It says ice on the left. And that image that they took and said that it was Roman who actually spoke in it was cropped out of that image on the bottom left of that screen on the right side.
And the expert they brought in to bring in this evidence is the expert that they used to, the way that they say that Roman is linked to Bitcoin Fog is they say that there was a email address, shoremint@hotmail.com, that was used to register the Bitcoin Talk forum like account for whoever created Bitcoin Fog. They said because Roman's IP address was on the same server within a few minutes of another IP address, he was that other IP address, the Shoremint at Hotmail. And so the expert that brought this in is the one that she called it this IP address overlap.
Imagine first time it's ever been done.
Yeah, it was the first time she'd ever done it. She had made it up and all this stuff like that. But that's their strongest link. But they brought her, she apologized for bringing in the false evidence, and they apologized to the jury, and the jury still went for him.
You know, they deliberated for a couple of days. It was not a quick decision by the jury whatsoever. So here we have a recap of all the evidence against Roman. You know, we had there was no evidence that Roman ever operated Bitcoin Fog. There was no logs on all the devices that were seized.
No servers.
No eyewitnesses testified against Roman or said that they talked to him about running it. There were no communications. You're running a big organization like Bitcoin Fog. You got to talk to your devs. Nothing like that on any of his devices. And the money doesn't add up. You know, there were some huge issues with the valuation. The government's overinflating the values of a lot of the funds going through to ramp it up for sentencing.
As if he was operating it, he should have had a hell of a lot more money than what they got when they seized all this stuff. But I mean, and what if you get one thing out of this is that this could be you, right? This case is entirely circumstantial. It's based on speculative tracing forensics and based on what looked like peer-to-peer transactions like over a decade ago. That was it. That was like the main evidence against him, and they just spun up this crypto is evil kind of weird witchcraft superstition narrative, and it really dominates.
It's a Biden era prosecution,
Biden era prosecution.
And we are hoping, with everybody else that's going through the same thing, Roger Ver, Ian Freeman, Roman Storm, William Hill, John Rodriguez, all these people are facing the same mighty dragon that Roman faced. And we're in this together, and we have an opportunity in the next few years of the Trump administration to make an actual change. Because if this swings the other way at the next election, Roman's going to be doing his whole sentence, and so is everyone else.
Yeah, we got to get everybody out.
We got to work on this now before the midterms.
But here he is.
This is the first time we're going to have a recording from Roman presented on to MoneroTopia. What's happened to him, and where we can go from there. He's in a tough spot. One of the most difficult things, like watching him from when he was arrested to now, is to watch his deterioration, becoming like a more harder individual. Because when he went in there, he was salt of the earth kind of guy. And now you can tell that he's been through years of not being able to trust anybody. And, you can hear that in someone's voice, how that changes a person. To be truly not free. Yeah, so Roman is talking there about, he talks about the conspiracy charges that they used against him. He talked about a couple of the more interesting pieces of the evidence that the government chose to introduce at trial, some of it being paint, Wi-Fi inhibiting paint that would prevent particular kinds of radiation from entering your home. The government makes that out to be, he was making it so that his entire house was a Faraday bag.
Yeah, they would just like chase down like a lot of like weird stuff like that.
Watering plants. He had a
remote plant watering system that we had to show them wasn't this him logging into the Bitcoin fog service, because they never found the Bitcoin fog service. They never got the Bitcoin logs. They don't have anything from the actual operation from Bitcoin fog or any communications like that. So they were desperate to show that he had this, because he was a digital nomad. So he had this plant watering system that he could log into his computer at home and water his plants. And then we discovered that they never bothered. He was in Sweden the entire time. He was never in the United States. Another big issue in the case. They never bothered to go and search his apartment in Sweden and seize his computer, which I found kind of fascinating, because they were talking to the Swedish police. And to me, it's almost like they didn't want to get another piece of evidence that showed he hadn't done this.
And they went to extreme lengths to take really mundane things and present them to the jury as if they were somehow really criminal. Like one of the things, he was trying to run a VPN service. He was trying to start a small business where he provided VPN service to people. He had 2 server blades in a Romanian server where he was running the VPN off of, and one of them was not used. So it all had zeros. It hadn't been written on yet. When you looked at the code, it was just zeros all the way down. And the government was saying that, he zeroed out the hard drive. He must have had a kill switch. The second he was arrested, it went to zeros. And Jeff Fishbach, our technical expert, he bought like 15 versions of this server and tested every single one of them and found out that all of them show up when they're new with zeros.
And they'd wiretap the Romanian server and nothing came up related to Bitcoin fog. They had him, he came to the United States in Miami in 2017 for like a month. They had him under surveillance. Nothing came up. It's like,
they pen trapped him. They had electronic surveillance on all of his devices. Nothing came up. No evidence of operating Bitcoin fog. Nothing at all.
And so they rolled the dice when they arrested him at LAX in April, end of April of 2021. And they seized all his devices, right? And I think they thought, we got him now and we're going to find all the evidence. But they didn't find a single thing on any of that stuff. But then they were in too deep. And, there's money at stake with the forensics and chain analysis and all this stuff. But if you want more information, you can go to, freeroman.org, right?
Freeroman.org. We also have the QR code, and I'll be handing out stickers to anybody interested. You can keep up with the case. We put updates up there. Our next date is that we got to deal with is July 31st. Is the opening appellate brief in Roman's appeal. We have a team of lawyers working on his appeal, working with some wonderful people who are experts in each and every issue that we plan on appealing, because we're taking this all the way home, because this is a ridiculous ridiculous miscarriage of justice to have Roman sitting in prison for not only something that he didn't do, but something that should be legal in the first place.
And they did committed no crime, even if he did it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.